My wife handed me divorce papers in the middle of our son's graduation, just minutes after he stepped off the stage. And standing next to her was my cousin. My name is Alexander Knight, 48 years old. I'm the founder and former CEO of Dynasty Corp. Once valued at over $900 million, I built that company from scratch, slept on cold floors in a Brooklyn basement, and worked 18-hour days for over 2 decades. I was also the husband of Victoria, the woman I loved, married, and trusted with both my heart and half my company. And that day, I was the father of Leo, our only son, graduating top of his class in economics at Dartmouth. More than any business deal I'd ever closed, he was my proudest achievement. We arrived early. I wore a tailored gray suit. Victoria wore a sleek black dress, modest, elegant, flawless. We were seated in the front row among the distinguished families. Leo took the stage, accepted his diploma, bowed his head, and looked right at us. I raised my phone to snap a photo. Victoria simply smiled, faintly. As Leo stepped off the stage, I turned to her and said, "He's got your eyes, especially when he smiles." She didn't respond. Instead, she reached into her handbag and pulled out a white envelope. Without a word, she placed it on my lap. I thought it was a letter, maybe something sentimental, a card. Inside was a divorce agreement already signed by her. Attached to it, a detailed asset breakdown, her demands. She wanted half of my company shares, the house, and full custody, even though Leo was legally an adult. I blinked. My hands tightened. I looked at her, searching for some sign this was a twisted joke. She didn't look back. Her eyes were fixed on the stage, distant. And then Marcus walked over, calmly, casually. He rested his hand on Victoria's shoulder, like it belonged there. Marcus, my cousin, the man I'd once called my brother, my former COO, the person I left in charge when I stepped back due to health reasons just months ago. Suddenly it all clicked. The vague financial reports, the poor executive decisions, the contracts that mysteriously fell through. None of it was coincidence. They'd played me. They'd taken the company. Now they were taking my family. I crushed the envelope in my fist, my jaw locked. My mind screamed, but I said nothing, because I knew if I said anything, I'd give them what they wanted, public humiliation. I stood up. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't beg. I didn't even look back at her. I walked out of my own son's graduation, leaving behind the 2 people I once trusted most, now standing side by side like they had just won the final round. But they were wrong. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't plead for love or justice or understanding. I would take everything back. I didn't go home. I just drove. No destination, no GPS, no music, just the steady hum of tires over pavement and a crumpled divorce paper lying silently on the passenger seat like a dead thing no one dared to bury. I glanced at it. Thin paper, a few cold sentences, a list of assets, a signature. And yet it weighed heavier than every failure in my life combined, not because of what she wanted, but because of how she chose to end it. At our son's graduation, with my cousin, Marcus, the same man who used to sleep on my couch after his divorce, the man I hired as COO when nobody else would touch him, the man who held my arm the day Dynasty went public, smiling like we'd conquered the world, together. And now he's the man standing beside my wife, like he's earned something. I pulled over near a quiet park, somewhere west of Boston, killed the engine, sat there gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went pale, and I thought of Leo, my son. He probably had no idea what just happened. He was still at the banquet hall, celebrating with his friends, a once-in-a-lifetime moment that both his parents were there for, except now they weren't a they anymore. I lowered my forehead to the wheel, not crying. I couldn't cry. This wasn't sadness anymore. It was humiliation. Victoria hadn't just left me. She'd staged it, calculated it. She waited for the perfect moment, not in private, not in dignity, but during our son's proudest hour, to destroy everything at once. And I stood there, frozen, like a goddamn prop in her little finale. But no more. I pulled out an old phone, a backup device I kept for security. Years of habit from running a tech firm. People called me paranoid, too meticulous, but I knew better. I unlocked a hidden drive. Inside were old emails, financial reports, transaction logs, documents I backed up before stepping down due to my heart condition. Things that didn't sit right at the time, and now they looked like evidence. I stared at the screen for a while, then I spoke. Not out loud, just under my breath. You think you've won. You think you've outsmarted me, but you don't even know the game you're playing. I won't fight for your love. I won't beg for your approval. I don't need either. But I will get back what's mine, my company, my name, my dignity. And when I'm done, you'll remember what it feels like to lose everything. I stepped out of the car. Boston air hit like ice. My breath fogged, my spine straightened. Across the street, under a broken lamppost, I saw my reflection faintly in the glass of a shop window. Same face, same man, but something had changed behind the eyes. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. This was about justice, about truth, about reminding people like them that even the quiet ones can burn everything down. And I would. They took my wife, they took my company. They tried to take my name, my legacy, my future, but they forgot one thing. I built this empire from the ground up, and I would rise again, brick by brick, starting now. I disappeared for 7 days. No word to Leo, no return home, no phone calls. I cut off everything, switched SIMs, brought out my old startup laptop, and reactivated the private networks I hadn't touched in years. I needed total silence to do something I hadn't done in over 2 decades. Investigate my own family. I retraced every document Marcus had sent while I was in recovery, every investment pitch Victoria had pushed through to help me rest. Emails deleted from company servers but backed up, thankfully, on the external hard drive I'd taken home, a habit she used to mock as paranoid hoarding. And then I found it. Right after I stepped back from operations, a block of my voting shares had been redirected to a strategic proxy trust. Beneficiary, Marcus Stone. They'd been planning this long before the divorce. I called Sarah Jenkins. No small talk, no pleasantries. I gave her one sentence. I want to take back my company, and I want to burn them to the ground. 2 seconds of silence, then she gave a quiet laugh. Send me everything you have. I like the smell of corporate blood. Sarah Jenkins is not your friendly neighborhood attorney. She's the kind of woman CEOs whisper about in boardrooms, the lawyer who's left 3 Fortune 500 executives bankrupt and 2 imprisoned. Her rule is simple. She only fights wars she knows she can win mercilessly. I sent her the first batch. Manipulated contracts, suspicious emails, shareholder vote logs, and a list of shell companies I'd traced back to Marcus's accounts. 3 hours later, she called me back. Marcus and Victoria used at least 2 shell corporations, both registered under their assistants' names, to quietly purchase shares from minority stakeholders. Can you prove they rigged the shareholder vote? I answered without hesitation. Yes. I started calling the old guard. Andrew Levison, our former head of finance, was pushed out when he flagged inconsistencies in the reserve fund. He still had a USB drive with original reports before they were doctored. He handed it to me without a word. Linda Tran, our ex-legal advisor, had witnessed Marcus sign share transfer agreements late at night without audit supervision. When I asked if she'd testify, she didn't hesitate. Bit by bit, brick by brick, we were reconstructing the betrayal. Then we found the smoking gun. Sarah's voice dropped when she saw it. This is it. A series of stock transactions routed through Marcus's parent company, registered in Delaware, a tax haven with hidden ownership laws. But they'd slipped. One document bore Victoria's signature, sent from her personal Gmail. I narrowed my eyes. Can this prove coordinated fraud? Sarah nodded slowly. It's enough to challenge the shareholder vote and shred your prenuptial agreement. If the court sees this as willful asset manipulation, she walks away with nothing. For the first time in over a week, I felt like myself again. Not the man dumped in front of a graduation stage. Not the former CEO. But the one man they should have never underestimated. That night, I met Sarah in person. Her office was on the 18th floor of a glass tower in Boston's financial district. No logo, no front desk. Just a black steel door with her name etched faintly on a bronze plaque. She wore black, hair tied low, sharp glasses. Her first words as I entered, "You sure about this?" I looked her dead in the eye. "I didn't come here to lose." She smiled. "Good, because if we hit them from both sides, corporate fraud and marital misconduct, Marcus faces federal scrutiny, and Victoria walks out with less than she walked in with." We spent 3 weeks building our case, day and night, in silence, dissecting every piece of data, contract, vote record, and email. We uncovered an internal memo Marcus had sent his assistant days after I left the company, laying out a succession plan that violated board rules, a plan Victoria had approved via blind copy. They thought I wouldn't look. They thought I'd fold. They forgot who built the empire. One evening I stood alone in my old office. The space was empty now. The frame painting Leo made me at age 8 was gone. So was the first $1 million plaque I once wept over. But I wasn't sad. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was preparing for war. By the 4th week after Leo's graduation, the war went public. Front page of the Boston Post. Alexander Knight, ex-CEO of Dynasty, accused of controlling behavior and financial manipulation in marriage. Below the headline was a photo of Victoria and me, cropped from a charity gala last year. I was facing the stage. She was looking down, smiling. A harmless moment, now twisted into a symbol of emotional disconnect and pressure in the private life of a high-achieving woman. As I scrolled through the article, I saw Marcus Stone, for the first time officially introduced as Victoria's new partner, a source of strength helping her recover from an emotionally unhealthy marriage. I wasn't surprised. I was just watching. That afternoon, Victoria's legal team sent an urgent motion requesting a fair distribution of assets, claiming partial control of our shared investment fund, and demanding access to the Cape Cod house due to emotional attachment. Sarah skimmed the documents, then gave a short laugh. "The first volley," she said, her voice cold and clear. "Media attack, emotional baiting, setting public sentiment. They're painting her as the brave woman escaping a toxic man. Classic playbook." I said nothing, just kept reading. That evening, Marcus appeared on the podcast We Talk Business, a show we used to co-host. This time he sat alone. Alexander is brilliant. No one denies that. But sometimes geniuses struggle with emotional connection at home. I don't want to speak ill of him. I just think maybe it was time for Victoria to breathe again. His voice was calm, his eyes lowered, feigning regret. But I knew better. Every word was scripted. Online, the comments came flooding in. Poor Victoria. Alexander must have been a nightmare to live with. Marcus is such a gentleman. Finally, someone who understands her. I read them all. No replies, no statements, no denials. Sarah, however, was already working. She called the PR crisis team immediately. No counterattack yet. Let them scream. Let the press simmer. When the court filing leaks, I want jaws to drop. Not because of drama, but because of facts. I returned to the gym after 3 weeks off. I trained hard, every morning soaked in sweat. I needed physical strength to withstand the pressure, and mental steel to walk through the noise. One afternoon, I met Leo at the old cafe near his dorm. He hadn't asked about the divorce since that day. This time, he looked straight at me. "Are you ever going to say anything?" I shook my head. "No, because the truth doesn't need to scream." He didn't push back. He just nodded. Not approval, but something had changed in his eyes. Trust. The following week, Sarah handed me a thick binder, almost 300 pages. It included everything: manipulated contracts, fraudulent share transfers, internal abuse of voting power, falsified dates, and personal email evidence. We submitted the official lawsuit to federal court. The very next day, the media picked it up from an anonymous source. This time, the headline dwarfed anything Victoria had released. Alexander Knight files lawsuit against ex-wife and cousin for fraud. Hundreds of millions at stake, evidence confirmed. I sat in an empty boardroom as the late sun cast long shadows across the floor. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "We didn't expect you to fight back." I stared at the screen, didn't reply. I just smiled, faint, cold, and deleted the message. Week 5. A cold Boston morning. I was brewing coffee when Sarah called, exactly 3 hours after receiving a confidential financial packet from one of our sources. "We've got it," she said. I didn't ask what. I just said, "I'm on my way." In her office, Sarah laid the papers out like a battlefield map. First, a bank statement, quiet, almost harmless. But when she cross-referenced it with one of the Delaware shell companies tied to Dynasty Corp., I saw it. The signatory, Marcus's personal assistant. No legal rep, no compliance officer, no board review, just a signature that had no right to authorize a multi-million-dollar transaction. Then came the kicker. The transfer was approved via Victoria's digital signature, dated precisely 3 days before a major shareholder vote. Sarah smirked. They thought hiding behind Delaware would protect them, but they forgot. Digital signatures are traceable, verifiable, and permanent. Combined with everything we'd gathered over the past month, the picture was now crystal clear. Victoria and Marcus had quietly funneled shares into dummy entities, redistributed voting power, and used bogus investment agreements to consolidate control under Dynasty's name with company funds. I asked calmly, "Is it enough for federal charges?" Sarah nodded once. "Financial fraud, shareholder manipulation, abuse of voting rights. It's all there, and if we win, those shares will be invalidated." I leaned back in my chair, not to rest, but to focus. That same week, we submitted an amended complaint to federal court with the new evidence. Simultaneously, Sarah released a verified summary to a veteran financial reporter, someone who'd once interviewed me the day Dynasty went public. 3 days later, it hit the front page of the Financial Herald. Leaked internal docs suggest Dynasty power grab involved key executives, ties to family betrayal exposed. The corporate world exploded. Investor forums lit up. The board of Dynasty Corp called for an emergency internal review. I didn't need to say a word. The truth had started speaking for itself. Marcus reappeared in public for the first time since the scandal began. A stiff press conference, no podcast charm, no friendly lighting. He stood behind a lectern, collar loose, eyes avoiding the camera. "We deny all allegations and will fully cooperate with authorities." He said, "we." But Victoria wasn't there. Within 24 hours, her social media accounts went private. Her company's website displayed a generic under-maintenance message. Journalists began asking the real questions. If she's innocent, why disappear? If she's the victim, why not defend herself? Why is her signature on corporate documents? There were no answers, but the public started to understand. The very next day, Victoria's legal team sent an offer. Settle quietly. No more asset claims, no fight over shares. Just one condition: confidentiality. Sarah looked up from the email and raised an eyebrow. "They've seen the edge. They're trying to walk it back." I nodded. "I don't want fame. I don't want revenge porn. I want the truth to come out, publicly and permanently." Sarah smiled, cold and satisfied. We drafted a reply, rejected unconditionally. That night, I watched Marcus's press conference again. He said all the right things: trust, justice, unfair media coverage. But I wasn't listening to his words. I was watching his eyes. Fear. for the first time since he stabbed me in the back. He was afraid. I turned off the screen, poured myself a whiskey, and stood at the window of my quiet, rented apartment, watching the flicker of city lights. There was no pain anymore, only one thought left in my mind: the courtroom awaits. And I'm ready. Monday, 9:00 a.m., Federal Courtroom 4, Boston. No cameras, no lights, no curated podcasts, just hard benches, cold air, and the sound of the judge's gavel echoing like thunder. The United States District Court for the District of Massachusetts is now in session. Case: Alexander Knight versus Victoria Knight and Marcus Stone. I sat upright. Harsh, fluorescent light carved every edge of the courtroom into sharp focus. Next to me was Sarah Jenkins, composed as ever, dressed in black, her presence like a blade sheathed but humming. Across the aisle, Victoria sat in a tailored gray suit, lips painted crimson, hands clasped tightly. I noticed her left wrist twitching, a tell she used to mask well. Marcus sat beside her, slouched slightly, no sign of his usual smirk, shirt wrinkled at the cuff, eyes down. I didn't speak, I didn't blink, I just looked at them, without anger, without nostalgia, without anything left to feel. Their lawyer spoke first, calm tone, soft delivery, painting the picture of a marriage that deteriorated from natural incompatibility, business decisions that were misunderstood, and paperwork errors due to leadership transitions. A carefully crafted fiction. Then Sarah stood. No emotion, no dramatics, just files, evidence lined up like dominoes. We're not here to litigate feelings. We're here to present documents, data, law, and truth. She walked through the chain of fraudulent transactions, Delaware shell corporations, internal dynasty funds rerouted and disguised, improper authorization of share transfers. Each point was backed by time-stamped documents matching bank records and digital signatures. This signature, Victoria Knight, approving the transfer of funds, and the receiving entity, Marcus Stone's personal assistant. Silence, palpable. Their legal team scrambled to respond, tried to spin it as accounting miscommunication and ambiguous permissions. But when Sarah revealed the original emails, direct from Victoria's private account, no one said another word. Then came the moment. Mrs. Knight, do you recall who received the funds approved on February 14th? Victoria froze. Sarah waited, then added, cool and sharp, we know, and so does the court, because that recipient is legally registered under your former home address. Then it was my turn to take the stand. I walked slowly, no notes, just memory. I'm not here to win back a wife. I'm not here to clean up my public image. I'm here to prove that betrayal doesn't kill a man. It silences him until he's ready. Today, I don't raise my voice. I raise the truth. And I believe justice doesn't need to shout. I didn't look at them, but I felt their eyes on me. And for a moment, I swear, Marcus lowered his head. Their attorney tried once more to salvage the narrative. Mentioned technical missteps, oral permissions, interpersonal misunderstandings. But no one could argue against a verifiable digital signature. No one could explain why a personal assistant held controlling interest. No one could deny the timing. Every shady deal happened after I was hospitalized. The judge read through the full case summary. Then he looked up, voice steady. This court finds the defendants, Victoria Knight and Marcus Stone, guilty of corporate fraud and violation of federal shareholder law. All contested transactions and asset transfers are declared null and void. Control and equity of Dynasty Corp are hereby restored in full to the plaintiff, Alexander Knight. All claims to marital asset division are rejected due to prenuptial breach and proven fraud. No applause, only the clack of keyboards, the rustle of legal folders, and one soft exhale from Marcus's side of the room. I stood, didn't look back, didn't speak, just turned and walked toward the door, and there in the hallway outside the courtroom, Leo was waiting. My son stood straight, hands in his coat pockets. He didn't hug me, didn't cry. He simply asked, "Is it over?" I met his gaze. "No, this is where it begins." I didn't go home after the verdict. To be honest, I no longer had a place I could call home. The Cape Cod estate was legally mine again, per the court's ruling, but I had no desire to return. That house had once been our sanctuary. Now it was just a monument to betrayal. I'd been staying in a temporary apartment, 6th floor, 1 bedroom, sparsely furnished. From the window, I could see the Charles River and in the distance the muted lights of the financial district. No one knew I lived there. No phone calls, no drop-ins, no one expecting me, and I liked it that way. I needed a few days to breathe, not because I was exhausted, but because I finally felt light, lighter than I'd been in months. Wednesday afternoon, I returned to the courthouse, not for paperwork, not for media, just to walk those stone steps again, not as a man betrayed, but as someone who'd just taken off a weight that had choked him for far too long. I stood inside the main hallway. The marble gleamed in the afternoon sun streaming through tall glass panels. The building felt less like a battlefield now, and more like a place of closure. That's when I saw her, Victoria. No lawyer, no Marcus, no cameras, no crowd. Just her, in a black trench coat, standing quietly near one of the white columns. She turned when she sensed me. Our eyes met. No anger, no apology, no bitterness. She looked at me like a woman who once knew me deeply, but now didn't know what to say. We didn't speak. We didn't have to. I didn't need an apology because it wouldn't matter. She didn't need my hatred because it wouldn't change a thing. We were simply two people who had once shared everything, now standing on either side of something that could never be rebuilt. I gave her a slight nod. Not forgiveness, just finality. She turned away first, walked straight out the door. I didn't stop her, I didn't follow. I just watched her leave, and felt, for the first time, free. On my way home, I passed a small park near the old Dynasty building. Leo and I used to sit there on weekends, sharing sandwiches and talking about things that never made the news. At a far bench, I saw a student, headphones in, reading an old finance book under the golden hour light. His posture, his stillness, it reminded me of who I used to be. I stopped for a second and then kept walking. That night, Leo called. "Dad?" "Yeah." "I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you." I paused, then smiled. "Thanks, son. You free tomorrow? Let's get dinner. No court talk, no mom talk, just you and me." I'd love that. Outside my window, the city lights flickered along the river, calm, unbothered, steady, just like I wanted to be. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't need sleeping pills. I returned to Dynasty Corp on a Monday morning. The sun was soft, no press, no announcement, no grand reopening. Just me, a 48-year-old man, walking back into the building he built from scratch. Once cast out like a stranger, now returning not as a victor, but as himself. Leo walked beside me, silent. He opened the door for me. There was nothing to say. The lobby looked the same, but everything had changed. I moved slowly through the familiar halls. Each step felt steady, not out of urgency, not to reclaim power, but to begin again. Not from zero, but from truth. I didn't fire anyone. I didn't issue statements of triumph. The first thing I did was reopen the company's bylaws. I fixed the loopholes I'd once ignored out of trust. I redistributed oversight, rebalanced control. I reinstated cross-checks in leadership. I met with every senior team member, those who stayed, those who left, even those who doubted me. And I didn't apologize. I simply said, I was gone, I'm back, and I'm paying attention now. A month later, I sent one company-wide email. No header, no signature block, just this. I lost a company, a marriage, and trust, because I thought silence was peace. But the truth doesn't need to be protected. It needs to be defended. If you see something wrong, say it. If you feel something's off, stand up. I will stand with you. One weekend evening, Leo and I sat on the rooftop. The wind was soft. Below us, the city moved on. Above us, the sky stretched open like a quiet invitation. Nothing lasts forever, not even pain. Leo turned to me and asked, "Do you regret any of it?" I thought for a moment, yes, but not because of what they did, because there was a moment I believed I couldn't survive it. He nodded, said nothing more, and I knew that was enough. I'm telling this story not to be pitied, not to be praised. I'm telling it because somewhere out there, someone is standing on the edge of betrayal, staring into a silence they don't know how to escape. And if that someone is you, then listen carefully. You don't need someone to save you. You just need to not abandon yourself. That's enough to start over, maybe tired, maybe late, but entirely unquestionably yours.